Hi, I'm so glad to see everyone here, and especially after this difficult year. And I know that some of us are disappointed because we can't be in Ithaca and in person, but the good part is that friends from far, far away, whom I haven't seen in more than 50 years, are able to join on this call. Um, and so I'm excited about that. I will say one of my friends said he would join in, but only if I provided free drinks, which I am, but it's you got to be here to get them. Anyway, I'm sure you know that this is the 50th anniversary week of our crazy graduation. And with those three walkouts and the demonstration on the stage, when professor professor of history emeritus Morris Bishop hit somebody over the head with the mace, the baton that he was carrying as he led the processional. And many people think that it was Dave Burek who was hit over the head, but Burek swears it wasn't him, it was his roommate. In any case, the demonstrators got hauled off stage and into a cop car. The bear at the top of the mace got bent and has never been the same since. And I'm guessing that probably some of us have not been the same since either. Remarkably, I remember that graduation really well. And I say it's amazing because people were passing a joint when we were standing in the processional as the faculty passed through. So I was definitely stoned throughout that ceremony. I wrote about this in my book, Ithaca Diaries, which is based on the journals that I kept as an undergraduate. It starts with me arriving at Cornell freshman year carrying the pink suitcase my Uncle Leon gave me for my bat mitzvah. It goes through the Trojan horse incident, the Res Club fire, the draft card burnings, demonstrations against the war, my love life. I don't know what I was thinking when I put that in. It ends just after Kent State on graduation day, when, to my amazement, I even led a demonstration. I was originally supposed to talk about Ithaca Diaries last year at our 50th, but with the pandemic, that didn't really work out. So Sally and Kathy asked me to introduce the social hour, and they have reminded me several times to be brief, that this is a happy hour. So I'm not going to reminisce a whole lot. What I'd like to do is move the ball forward a little bit, wax historical and philosophical for a couple of minutes, and then we'll break out the drinks. Join the breakout session. So since Ithaca Diaries came out, I've been working on two sequels. The first sequel is about my first year out of Cornell, and I imagine many of us had similar experiences after all the turmoil on campus and the changes in the late 60s. Things were really different between the time we graduated from high school and the time we graduated from college. But by graduation day, I had no idea what to do with myself. And of course, I was an English major, which I don't really have to explain what that meant. But as a fledgling feminist, I wanted to prove that I could do things, and anything a guy could do, I could do. And it was really an adventure that first year. First, I got a bunch of short-term jobs. First, I worked for the ILR school, interviewing hospital administrators around the country. Then I worked in a political campaign where my boss was a Pol who spent his days kind of pretending to read the newspaper, but surreptitiously staring at my legs. But, I have to admit that our skirts then were extremely short. But anyway, after the campaign, I hated politics. So I went on a road trip. I went cross country with two guys I did not know, whose names I found on a bulletin board. They were both named John. So John and I drove cross country in this You Drive It big black Buick, picking up every derelict and druggie we ran into along the way. Once we got to California, I headed back to Philadelphia, where I worked in the ghetto with disadvantaged teenagers. So, and then I wound up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a lot of different reasons. And that's where the first sequel, which I'm calling Philadelphia Stories, ends. So then Harrisburg, 1971, this is the sequel to the sequel. It turned out that 3 of our classmates, Ed Zuckerman, Fred Soloway, and Vincent Blocker, were also in Harrisburg, each for his own reasons. We and some other people ended up starting a newspaper there in conjunction to a major political trial. You probably know of the trial of the Harrisburg 8. It has kind of an interesting Cornell connection. You probably also recall Dan Berrigan, who was the poet, priest, anti-war activist who was deputy director of Cornell United Religious Work. Anyway, Dan Berrigan was in prison for his anti-war activities. His brother Philip was also in prison for the same activities. And while he was in prison, J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, accused Phil Berrigan of conspiracy to kidnap Henry Kissinger and blow up underground heating tunnels in Washington, D.C. Also accused was Cornell professor, I guess he had just left Cornell, Iqbal Ahmad, who some of you may have had in the ILR school. Anyway, the 2 of them and 6 other nuns and priests and such were accused of conspiracy to kidnap Henry Kissinger and blow up those underground heating tunnels. And some people have called it actually the trial of the century. So Ed, Fred, and Vincent and I ended up starting a newspaper called the Harrisburg Independent Press, AKA HIP, around the trial of the Harrisburg 8. That's how I became a journalist. I mean, the paper was really quite amazing. And for the last few years, I've been working on a book about my experiences at HIP. A few weeks ago, I was working on the conclusion and I asked myself, what the heck am I doing? Why am I time traveling, going back into the past all the time? And I decided that one reason is personal. As with Ithaca Diaries, I needed to understand on a personal level just what had gone down. Everything was in so much turmoil, and I just kind of kept going. So to get things straight in my own head, I needed to understand what was going on in order to figure out what to do next. But another reason, I think, is historical and societal. You know, when I first started working on the Harrisburg book, Trump was just coming into office, and I felt that the country was divided, much as it was in the late 60s and early 70s. So I thought it might be interesting to draw some parallels between the present day divisiveness along the lines of race, poverty, ethnicity, even corruption, to draw parallels with today and what was going on back then under the Nixon administration with race relations, the Vietnam War, dirty tricks and such. So then I thought about my first book. It's called Broken Patterns. It's about our generation of professional women in relation to our mothers and grandmothers. And it describes a spiral pattern in history, a spiral pattern that I think holds true for individuals as well. So if you'll indulge me for a couple more minutes, I'd like to pontificate a bit. Many of us, myself included, tend to think about progress in a linear way. That is, that to progress, we move forward in a straightforward path toward a goal. But the older I get, the more I see that life sort of emerges in a series of starts and stops. We get just so far in moving toward a goal. Maybe we reach it, maybe we get blocked from it, but at a certain point, as a society or as an individual, we tend to pull back to reassess, to reintegrate our own pasts, our country's past, in order to move forward once again. So I think that now, as a society, we're at a turning point in a spiral that's kind of similar to where we were 50, 51 years ago. Now, as then, society is divided. Many people have moved toward equality, but many others have been left behind, or worse. As you know, there are issues of race, poverty, war, environment, how government should work, what kind of nation we want to be. But despite all of the disruptions, the divisiveness, and the violence, I feel heartened that many of us are looking back historically to understand how we got to this place so that we can regroup to find new ways of doing things. I know that I'm painting with a very broad brush, but I believe, or I hope, that retreating a bit to reassess will allow us to move forward as individuals and as a society once again. So that's the end of the pontificating. Thank you for bearing with me. And I guess in closing, what I want to say is that in the same way, coming together for our 50th or 51st gives us the chance to look back, to heal, to understand, to figure out where we're at in order to find new ways to move forward in our own lives. I'm hoping that in our social, happy hour, we'll have a chance to catch up, to figure out where we've been, where we are now, and what adventures come next as we enter this new phase of our lives. So thank you and cheers. I'll see you shortly.